Although frequently associated with the dead mother trope, the fact is Disney can usually be counted on to churn out a few moms every decade and spare them from the proverbial chopping block.
Here's a little something to help you get started.
Actually, though the classics might imply otherwise, the studio does have a formidable cast of moms at its disposal, owing in part to its extensive history and in part to the writers actively avoiding the trope in recent years.
What do you say, Louis? Do you want to be a Robinson?
But even in the wonderful world of Disney, not all mothers are created equal. I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and in honor of the week of Mother's Day, we're counting down the Disney moms, this time from worst to best. So let's get to it.
No matter where I go, you will always be my mother.
First off, some clarification. While in many cases, if a character is a good mom, she's usually a somewhat noble character, and vice versa. But just as true in the real world, this isn't always the case. Some otherwise evil characters are actually good mothers, and likewise the reverse is sometimes true. So today, we're breaking down our list solely by how effective they are as maternal figures in the lives of their kids. We'd say spoilers abound from here on out, but come on. You probably know how these go at this point. Starting off with the dark side, we'll be starting with the worst mothers. The worst mother in Disney's repertoire is also arguably the most intriguing. Zira from The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. The Swahili word Zira translates to hate, and that word encompasses our worst mother completely. Zira presents herself as an ousted radical loyal to Scar as king. She amassed followers under this sentiment and raised her children by it, including her favored adopted son Kovu, who was Scar's chosen heir.
He was hand-chosen by Scar.
Her villain song, My Lullaby, is a hellfire level of chilling in its subject matter, contrasting the brutal images of war with a lullaby, illustrating how Zira is raising her children to be soldiers willing to kill or die for her cause of overthrowing Simba. But notice, she never promises a better future for their children should they succeed. She exclusively glorifies in prospect of the initial conquest, the drums of war, the mournful cries, and their flag flying in the middle of it all.
The pounding of the drums of war.
That was her mentality that she imposed on her children and expected them to adhere to it no matter what.
I must kill him.
Gradually though, this hatred costs Zira everything and consumes her effortlessly. She suppresses any emotional response other than rage. To the end, she never expresses any regret from the damage she does, if she acknowledges it at all. Conclusively, Zira manipulated and indoctrinated her children into being her soldiers, and never offered them any maternal care beyond that.
Remember your training as a unit.
Her own firstborn is killed in the line of duty, and when her remaining child, who followed her into battle moments prior, calls for an armistice, she announces her intent to kill her without hesitation.
You will die as well.
Truly, she's the worst. But coming very close to the very bottom, surprising no one, is Tangled's mother Gothel. A super centenarian literally kept young by her daughter Rapunzel, Mother Gothel boasts a theatric flair and a charismatic demeanor that, unfortunately, she uses to manipulate Rapunzel into subservience.
Don't ever ask to leave this tower again.
Gothel boasts no magical ability of her own in her original appearance. Instead, her power over her captive daughter relies on gaslighting Rapunzel and instilling false ideas about the world outside the tower where she's kept. Her villain song, Mother Knows Best, illustrates the nature of her mind games by showing her actually distorting the light in the tower, effectively keeping Rapunzel in the dark and ensuring she only sees what Gothel wants her to. When all the flash in Disney's gorgeous animation is set aside, this is actually a rather brilliant metaphor for the psychological abuse that a narcissistic, or even an overbearing parent is capable of. One that resonates with many people who have been in a similar situation. Gothel's use of fear and facades extends to her daily interactions with Rapunzel as well. She superficially presents herself as an accommodating and positive presence in Rapunzel's life while using guilt to dampen Rapunzel's confidence, thus ensuring she's kept helpless.
Oh, great.
Now I'm the bad guy.
And this method only gets thinner throughout the film as Rapunzel continues to defy her. By the end, she reveals herself as a bitter, selfish, and unflinching woman who will do anything to get what she wants.
Now look what you've done, Rapunzel.
And all of this is before you get to the sequel material and learn that Gothel had a biological daughter as well, whom she openly misused, insulted, and finally abandoned in pursuit of keeping Rapunzel's magic to herself. This shows us Gothel doesn't really possess any nurturing tendencies. So as far as her fate goes, yeah, she had it coming. Following Gothel is Lady Tremaine, Cinderella's wicked stepmother, and more importantly, for the sake of this video, mother to the vain and awkward Anastasia and Drizella.
Not going? Oh, what a shame.
Of course, it isn't a secret that Tremaine is a heinous woman and a terrible stepmother, but surely she has some redeeming qualities in the way she looks after her own daughters. Well, no, not really. Anastasia and Drizella are obviously not up to their mother's standards, and for much of the original film, Tremaine uses her late husband's wealth to try and make up for that. In many instances, Tremaine appears frustrated by, but at least sympathetic to her own children and saves the real animosity for Cinderella.
Let me out! You must let me out!
But while Tremaine can overlook incompetence, defiance is another story completely. In fact, by the Cinderella direct-to-video sequels, Lady Tremaine reveals herself as completely selfish in her motivations and won't hesitate to dispose of anyone, including her own daughters, if they threaten her carefully laid plans.
We shall find you men of wealth and nobility.
She merits this out onto both of them, to Anastasia, who begins to catch on to what a terrible woman Tremaine is, and even Drizella, who never questions her mother's authority.
Drizella, come along.
Her actions here imply that she only values her daughters for their status as eligible noblewomen, and thus instruments of elevating her own status, be it by blood or by marriage. This woman really doesn't need any daughters or anyone to hold power over.
I won't let you fail me. Again.
Our next entry places on a bit of a technicality, and it's Queen Grimhilda, better known as the evil queen from Snow White. The queen is not known to have any biological children and only assumes motherhood of Snow White through marriage.
Snow White.
Thus, unlike Tremaine and Gothel, we can only judge her by her interactions with her stepchild. And what horrible actions these are. In the vein of all wicked stepmothers, the queen reduces Snow White to a scullery maid in hopes of keeping her beauty in check. But when her worst nightmare comes true and Snow White succeeds her as the fairest of them all, she plots to have her stepdaughter killed.
Bring back her heart.
This ultimately fails, but it doesn't deter the queen, and she takes the attempt into her own hands, sacrificing her all-important beauty in the process.
Now, make a wish. And take a bite.
This detail in particular indicates the queen's actions are less motivated by her ambition and more by her hatred of potential challengers. This makes the fact that her only view of Snow White is as a challenger rather than a daughter all the more depraved.
He perished in the land.
With the worst moms out of the way, we now enter the gray area. In a surprisingly neutral spot, we have everyone's favorite sea witch, Ursula, who arguably serves as a mother figure to her slippery henchmen, Flotsam and Jetsam. The twin eels are notably very competent for Disney underlings, and Ursula is appropriately cordial, if not genuinely maternal with them. She treats them more like beloved pets than actual children, but you gotta hand it to her. The eels don't fear her and enjoy being close to her. She praises them for their accomplishments, isn't shy with physical affection, and even genuinely mourns them before turning her rage onto Ariel. While technically she's the reason they die, at least she cares.
My poor little poopsies.
That's more than we can say for our last few. Interestingly, it might be argued that Ursula, for all her faults, actually has a good sense of maternity, possibly due to the caring, if somewhat indulgent, relationship she had with her own mother, something her sister, Morgana, comments on.
Morgana, why can't you be more like your sister?
In the center of our list, we have our perfect neutral in the form of Lewis's mother, from Meet the Robinsons. Now, we only see Louis's mother for a few seconds in the film, but Louis's one brief memory of her is a major point in the movie. Eventually, it serves as his primary motivation to join Wilbur on their adventure, so that he can meet her. The thing about this character, though, is that she's basically Schrodinger's mom. While the director of the orphanage suggests that she wasn't ready to care for him, we never learn for sure what her motivation was.
He may not have been able to take care of you. Did you ever think of that?
Equally, we never learn the potential consequences of her not leaving him there, since he doesn't take the chance he gets to speak to her. We can only go by guesswork and implication in placing this character, which would be unfair, so we can only go on her brief appearance. She protects her baby from the rain, hugs him goodbye, and then leaves his life for good. For better or worse, she's definitely a mother, and that alone earns her a spot on the list. Inching our way up to the more wholesome entries on our list, our next entrant isn't ranked because of her character, rather the minor role she plays in her daughter's struggles. Queen Leah from Sleeping Beauty. Leah does appear to be a dedicated mother to Aurora in the time she does appear, hosting an extravagant christening in her honor, and even consenting to letting her daughter be raised by the good fairies for her protection.
Then she can undo this fearful curse?
But afterwards, she has no significant interaction with Aurora and is even ignorant of, literally asleep during, the film's major conflict. Of course, the latter could be said for Aurora as well. Finally, we arrive at the pure. These are the good moms. Fortunately, our category for good animated moms more or less dominates the list, beginning with Queen Athena, mother of Ariel and her 6 elder sisters, again more a victim of minimal screen time, not even appearing in the original 1988 film. Athena's absence in the kingdom following her death is felt by everyone. She was a beloved queen and mother to her daughters, evident by the fact that all 7 adopted her love of music and fought to have it restored to the kingdom. Due to the nature of their loss, Triton's prejudice against the human world is established as well.
Spineless, savage, harpooning fish eaters!
Athena is an unfortunate case. We get the sense of how much she loved and was loved solely by how deeply she's missed.
Like when Mom was here.
Moving up in the list, we have Ariel herself. After giving birth to a daughter following the first movie, we actually get a scope of how much motherhood has matured the Little Mermaid. Much like her father before her, Ariel is traumatized into over-sheltering and even lying to her daughter Melody in order to protect her, leaving her to feel cut off from a part of her world.
I never want you going out there again, do you hear me? It's dangerous in the sea.
She eventually falls down the same trap that Ariel did, and Ariel is less apt to handle the consequences than you'd think. Still, she goes to great lengths, even returning to the sea to get her daughter back.
We should have told you the truth.
Franny from Meet the Robinsons comes next. Undoubtedly the most creative entrant we have. We see in her youth that Franny was a lover of fine music and concretely believed that frogs possessed latent musical talent, something that didn't particularly endear her to the people around her.
They all think I'm crazy.
Following her marriage to Cornelius, she continues to hone her passion on a far grander scale, alongside being a mother to her son Wilbur. Possibly due to her connection with Cornelius, who spent most of his formative years in an orphanage, Franny obviously takes family very seriously. She both nurtures and fights alongside the members of her eccentric brood during the course of the movie, and even grounds Wilbur, until he's dead, for tampering with the timeline that keeps them all together.
Mister, you're grounded till you die.
We see her maternity extend even further when she takes on a motherly role with Louis, unaware of his true identity, and even announces her intent to adopt him after knowing him for a relatively short period.
I mean, who'd be a better family for you than us?
Overall, despite her flighty and fun exterior, Franny obviously loves her family very much, and it's clearly important to her to be there for them when they need her. All she asks in return is that her family acknowledge that she's always right, even when it doesn't seem like it.
Even when I'm wrong. I'm right.
Our next entry comes with a bang. It's Bambi's mom. There isn't much to say about Bambi's mother that most people aren't already pretty clear on. Her brief time on screen is among the most gut-wrenching bit of animation in Disney's repertoire, both for its heartbreaking nature and raw illustration of the depths of maternal love. This was a very controversial move for Disney at the time, but Bambi's mom really is a hell of a mom in the time we do have her on screen. She educates Bambi on the bounties and the dangers of their forest home, cares for her fawn during a bitter winter, and ultimately does whatever she can to ensure his survival.
Bambi, quick, the thicket!
Chicha comes next, in proof that you can have someone who literally embodies all the common tropes and still have her be a compelling character.
Look how much you've grown.
Because Chicha is nothing if not formulaic. She's a very stereotypical mom character, heavily pregnant throughout the film, aggressively supportive, and an incredibly dedicated homemaker for her husband and their children. All despite being visibly tired by them, she never seems to lose her patience holding down the fort while her husband is on his journey.
Your dad's fine. He just went back to see the Emperor.
In one notable instance, Chicha actually works alongside her kids to hinder Yzma and Kronk, and in doing so, never once scolds her kids for their boisterous and messy idea of fun, but rather teaches them how to put it all to a constructive use.
Okay, kids, you know what to do.
Honestly, that's a hot take even by today's standards. It's hard to believe that she's voiced by the same actress who plays Beatrice Horseman. Sarabi from The Lion King comes next. Now, we don't see if Sarabi had the same parental impact on Simba that Mufasa had, but we do see her as a very strong and capable figure in Simba's life while also maintaining a nurturing and even playful side with him as a cub.
It's all right with me.
You can also see, after Mufasa's death, the utter devastation that the loss of her family brings her. But Sarabi is a mother more or less defined by her strength, evident in how she eventually channels her grief into loyalty to her family's memory, and to Mufasa's respect for the natural order of the Pride Lands.
If you were half the king Mufasa was.
In fact, Sarabi doesn't let her grief or her deposition as queen of Pride Rock hamper her dedication to her fellows, all the while holding fast to the memory of her husband and son. Understandably, her reunion with Simba is an incredibly visceral one, though often overlooked for its subtlety. After being physically struck by Scar, she looks up and sees her son, a spitting image of his father, and can barely dare to believe it.
Simba, you're alive?
You can see in her face the quiet awe, like she's seeing an impossible answered prayer come true. While appropriately hurt to hear that Simba assumes responsibility for his father's death, she doesn't begrudge him the years he spent on the run, and welcomes him back as rightful king when the Battle of Pride Rock concludes. Eudora, Tiana's mother, comes next. While Tiana often cites her father as the inspiration for her sense of conviction, her mother, as well, was someone not at all afraid of hard work. She worked as a seamstress, a traditionally very demanding and low-earning job, and even managed to keep herself and Tiana sustained after losing her husband to the war. Eudora certainly had different ideas for her daughter's future than Tiana did, wondering whether or not her dreams were worth the personal sacrifices she was making, but ultimately let Tiana decide on that for herself. She still supported the plans Tiana made for herself and unflinchingly empathized with her reasons behind them, illustrated in how, as a grand opening gift, she brings Tiana her father's old gumbo pot.
I know. I miss him too.
Our bronze medal goes to Sina, wife of the chieftain and mother to Moana. She is the mediator between her daughter and husband, explaining to Moana the fear that motivated her father to keep her away from the ocean.
Waves like mountains.
However, when she found out that Moana had made up her mind to make her fated journey, she doesn't stop her. This is an incredibly brief scene and sees her off, a considerable first for Disney moms. In fact, it's Moana's love for her mother and the rest of her people that motivates her seafaring quest. Moana's mother is a distinct case in that she is one of the few mothers in our roster to completely respect her child's autonomy, While it might be argued that she expects Moana to succeed her father, she doesn't pressure her daughter to behave in any certain way as the up-and-coming chief. Nor does she ever use her authority as Moana's mother to exude any influence over her. Rather than forbid her outright as her father had, for example, Sina gently discourages Moana by appealing to her sense of reason.
It's just not meant to be.
When Moana chooses to follow her instincts anyway, she stands aside and openly supports her. That's a pretty rare but refreshing stance to see Disney take. Our silver medal of motherhood goes to a mom that Disney frequently overlooks. Treasure Planet's Sarah Hawkins. A single parent struggling with maintaining her inn and keeping her son Jim out of trouble, Sarah ranks where she does because, despite the story's fantastical setting, her struggles are also relatable.
Thank you, officers. It won't happen again.
Despite being a loving mother who engages with and encourages her young son, Treasure Planet doesn't shy away from how drawn and overwhelmed she feels throughout the story, something that any parent could relate to. In fact, while the movie spends the bulk of the story focusing on Jim coming to terms with his father's abandonment, it also doesn't shy away from showing us how Sarah has already done so and spent her time since dealing with the backlash. Jim copes with missing his father in dangerous ways, which threaten both his safety and his future. Again, something that's pretty relatable.
Do you want to go to juvenile hall?
But shows us the emotional toll that takes on his mother. And all this is before the movie's inciting incident where her inn, her only way of making a living, is torched before her eyes.
I'm afraid the old Benbow Inn has burned to the ground.
Sarah ultimately makes the hard decision to allow Jim's voyage into the unknown in pursuit of Treasure Planet, something he does in order to save their livelihood, in hopes that it'll give him what he needs to grow up.
Jim, I don't want to lose you.
This is another harsh reality that the character doesn't shy away from, the acknowledgement that sometimes you have to step back and let your kid handle their affairs on their own. Now then, taking home the gold medal of motherhood is Tarzan's own Kala. Going back to our comment on being a good mother in the face of harsh realities, Kala really drives this point home. She adopts the orphaned Tarzan after her own biological child is killed by Saber, and raises him with love and support in the face of the prejudice they receive from members of their community, particularly her own mate.
No. You have to take it back.
Kala is another great example of daunting real-life themes being present in fantastical settings, and more or less personifies Tarzan's struggle between his identity as a human and his loyalty to his family.
See? They're exactly the same.
But Kala doesn't ever stand in the way of this struggle, even though she understands the risk it poses to them both. Like a mother, she worries for her child, and about the possibility that he'll leave her forever. But she doesn't discourage him from the truth, and even takes him to the treehouse his birth parents built so that he can see the truth of his heritage.
I just want you to be happy, whatever you decide.
She cries over seeing him come to terms with the truth of himself, but she does so silently, showing her love for him. And what follows is among the most bittersweetly painful exchanges to come out of a Disney cartoon.
And you will always be in my heart.
Kala, you did good with that one. So Disney fans, what do you think of our list? Who's your favorite Disney mother character? Remember to hit that notification bell and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality of the characters in your favorite cartoons, movies, and shows. But most importantly, stay wicked.